Remember the 5th of November, the rhyme? But
Yeah.
have you ever really stopped to think about what happened on that fateful night? 'Cause we're talking bonfires, fireworks, a
Right.
holiday atmosphere. But the real story behind Bonfire Night is anything but celebratory.
Hmm.
It's a story of a plot so audacious, so daring,
Mm-hmm.
it could have changed the course of British history forever.
Absolutely. It's the Gunpowder Plot, a failed attempt to blow up the Houses of Parliament
Wow.
and assassinate King James I in 1605. You've got a stack of articles on this.
Yeah.
And let me tell you, we're about to deep dive into a world of religious tension, political intrigue,
Yeah.
and ultimately a desperate gamble that went terribly wrong.
So set the scene for us. What was going on in England at this time? Why were things so volatile?
Well, imagine England in 1605. The Protestant Reformation has swept across Europe, leaving deep divisions in its wake. England, under King James I, was officially Protestant, but there was a sizable Catholic population, and they were facing persecution. James, a staunch Protestant, inherited a nation still grappling with the aftershocks of the Reformation.
Hmm?
His policies, like enforcing the oath of allegiance,
Yeah.
which forced Catholics to deny the Pope's authority, were seen as a direct attack on their faith.
So it's against this backdrop of simmering religious tension that we meet our main player, Robert Catesby. This is a man driven to desperate measures. Tell us about him.
Robert Catesby was a devout Catholic.
Okay.
Deeply opposed to the king's policies. He believed that only radical action could change the situation.
Wow.
So he gathered a small group of like-minded men, and together they hatched a plan so audacious, so daring, it would either make them heroes or martyrs. Think cloak and dagger meetings in dimly lit taverns, hushed whispers of rebellion, and a growing sense of determination, or perhaps desperation,
Right.
that fueled their plot.
And this plot, of course, became known as the Gunpowder Plot. Can you walk us through what they had in mind?
Their target, the Houses of Parliament, their weapon of choice, 36 barrels of gunpowder, enough to reduce the building and everyone inside to rubble.
Oh my gosh.
They planned to strike on November 5th, the day of the state opening of Parliament, when the king himself would be present.
It's hard to even fathom the level of planning and secrecy that must have gone into this. What did they actually do to put this plan into action?
They started by securing a lease on an undercroft,
Okay.
a cellar directly beneath the House of Lords. It was perfect.
Really?
Dark, secluded, easily accessible from the River Thames, which is how they planned to smuggle in the gunpowder.
Wow.
Imagine these men, under the cover of darkness, hauling barrel after barrel of explosives into this hidden space, knowing that the fate of their nation and their own lives hung in the balance.
And it wasn't just about blowing things up, right? They had a plan for what would happen after the explosion.
Absolutely, chaos alone wouldn't achieve their goal. Catesby aimed to install a Catholic monarch after the assassination, essentially staging a coup and restoring the Catholic faith to prominence in England. They planned to kidnap King James's young daughter, Princess Elizabeth, and declare her the new queen under a Catholic regency.
So they had their target, their weapon, their escape route, and even a plan for the aftermath, it seems like. They thought of everything, but every good story needs a twist, right? And in this case, the twist came in the form of a mysterious letter.
That's right. Just 10 days before the planned attack, one of the conspirators, a man named Lord Monteagle, received a letter warning him to stay away from Parliament on November 5th. The letter itself was vague, almost cryptic, talking about a terrible blow that would befall those in attendance.
Now, this raises some very interesting questions. Who sent the letter? And why was it a concerned citizen trying to prevent bloodshed, or did someone get cold feet and try to sabotage the plot from within?
To this day, the author of the Monteagle letter remains a mystery. Some historians believe it was written by Francis Tresham, a conspirator who had second thoughts about the plan, particularly as his brother-in-law, Lord Monteagle, was a target.
Oh.
Others theorize it could have come from a government agent already privy to the plot, hoping to expose it without revealing their source.
Regardless of who sent it, this letter threw a wrench into the conspirators' plans.
Yeah.
What happened next? Did they panic? Did they abandon the plot altogether?
The letter sowed seeds of doubt and fear amongst the group.
Right.
Some, like Thomas Wintour, argued for abandoning the plot, believing their cover was blown. But Catesby remained resolute, convinced they could still succeed. He believed the letter to be a bluff, nothing more than an attempt to scare them off. He rallied the remaining conspirators, urging them to stay the course.
So the clock is ticking, November 5th is fast approaching, and now they have this added element of uncertainty hanging over them. What happens next?
Well, the Monteagle letter had reached King James I, and needless to say, he was not pleased. He immediately ordered a search of the Houses of Parliament.
So the game was on.
You would think so, right, but here's where things take another unexpected turn. The initial search of Parliament conducted on November 4th actually failed to uncover the gunpowder. Can you imagine the tension? 36 barrels of explosives hidden beneath the feet of the king and his entire government, and they missed it.
Wow, talk about a close call. What happened? How could they overlook something so crucial?
Well, the search party focused mainly on the rooms and chambers above ground, assuming the threat would be more visible.
Right.
The undercroft, being a storage space, wasn't given much attention.
Hmm.
It was dimly lit, filled with piles of firewood and other supplies, and the gunpowder barrels were cleverly concealed.
So the conspirators got lucky. It seems almost unbelievable that their plan wasn't foiled right then and there.
It does, doesn't it? But remember, the Monteagle letter was vague. It didn't specify a location or even the nature of the threat. So while the king was understandably concerned, the searchers didn't have a clear idea of what they were looking for.
But they didn't give up, right? They went back for a second search.
Exactly. King James, still suspicious, ordered a more thorough search this time, specifically targeting the undercrofts and cellars beneath Parliament. And this time, they brought along someone who knew exactly what to look for. Sir Thomas Knivet, a man known for his expertise in uncovering conspiracies.
So Knivet's the hero of the hour.
He certainly played a pivotal role in the early hours of November 5th. Knivet and his men descended into the undercroft, and there, among the firewood, they discovered the 36 barrels of gunpowder. And standing guard beside them, they found a man calling himself John Johnson, but who was in reality none other than Guy Fawkes.
Guy Fawkes. Now, this is a name everyone's heard of. Tell us about him. What was his role in all of this?
Guy Fawkes, a soldier of fortune with a reputation for his skills with explosives, was tasked with guarding the gunpowder and igniting the fuse. He was essentially the triggerman for the entire plot. He was captured red-handed and under interrogation and torture. He confessed to the plot and revealed the names of his co-conspirators.
So the plot was foiled. What happened to the other conspirators? Did they try to flee?
Knowing their plan had been discovered, the remaining conspirators fled Leyland, hoping to reach the Midlands and rally support for their cause. They were pursued relentlessly by the king's forces, and ultimately their escape attempt ended in a last stand at Holbeach House in Staffordshire.
A last stand? That sounds dramatic. How did it all end?
It was a desperate fight. Outnumbered and outgunned, the conspirators made their final stand, defending themselves against the king's soldiers during the battle. A stray spark ignited some gunpowder that was being dried by a fire, causing a premature explosion that injured several of the conspirators, including Catesby. He was killed in the ensuing fight, clutching a picture of the Virgin Mary.
Wow, what a tragic end to a daring but ultimately misguided plan. What about Guy Fawkes? What was his fate?
Guy Fawkes, along with several of the other captured conspirators, was taken back to London to face trial. They were found guilty of high treason and sentenced to be hanged, drawn, and quartered, a gruesome punishment reserved for the most heinous crimes. Fawkes, however, cheated the executioner by leaping from the scaffold and breaking his neck, dying instantly.
So the gunpowder plot was foiled, its leaders dead, and the king and parliament safe. But the story doesn't end there, right? This event had a lasting impact on English history and culture.
Absolutely. In the aftermath of the plot, Parliament passed the Observance of 5th November Act, also known as the Thanksgiving Act. This act wasn't about turkey and gratitude as we know it today.
Right.
But it mandated an annual public day of Thanksgiving on November 5th to commemorate the king's deliverance and the foiling of the plot.
And that's how Bonfire Night was born.
Exactly. Initially, it was a solemn day of religious observance with sermons and prayers thanking God for saving the king and Parliament over time. However, the celebrations evolved, becoming more secular and festive, incorporating bonfires, fireworks, and even effigies of Guy Fawkes, which were burned as a symbol of the plot's failure.
That's fascinating. Amazing to think that a holiday we associate with fireworks and celebration has such dark and dramatic origins.
It's a reminder that history is full of unexpected twists and turns. And speaking of twists, there's another layer to this story that I think you'll find particularly intriguing. It's about how Guy Fawkes, a convicted traitor, executed for his role in the gunpowder plot, has become a symbol of rebellion, even a pop culture icon in modern times.
Now that's a twist I didn't see coming. How on earth did that happen? Okay, so we've gone from a failed assassination attempt to an annual celebration, and now we're talking about Guy Fawkes as a symbol of rebellion. It's like the gunpowder plot has taken on a life of its own beyond the historical event itself.
It really has.
Help me understand this transformation. How did it happen?
Well, it's a fascinating example of how historical figures can be reinterpreted and reappropriated over time. You see, the image of Guy Fawkes began to shift almost immediately after his death. Early depictions often portrayed him as a shadowy, sinister figure, emphasizing his role as the villain of the story.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. He was, after all, a convicted traitor who tried to blow up the king.
Right, exactly. But as time went on, and particularly as the religious tensions of the 17th century faded, the portrayal of Guy Fawkes started to evolve. He became less of a religious fanatic and more of a symbol of resistance against perceived tyranny.
So how did that shift manifest itself? Did people start celebrating him as a hero?
Not quite. It was more subtle than that. Over the centuries, depictions of Guy Fawkes in popular culture became more stylized, almost cartoonish. He was often shown with exaggerated features, a long nose, a pointy beard, a sinister grin. This shift towards a more exaggerated, almost comical villain paved the way for his modern-day persona.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection by making him more of a caricature. He becomes less threatening, almost a figure of folklore, rather than a real historical figure.
Precisely. And this less threatening, almost folk hero version of Guy Fawkes was ripe for reinterpretation. And that reinterpretation came in the form of a graphic novel published in 1982,
Hmm.
V for Vendetta.
Ah, V for Vendetta. I've seen the movie adaptation. It's incredibly visually striking, and that Guy Fawkes mask is unforgettable. But a graphic novel sparked this whole transformation.
It was a pivotal moment in V for Vendetta, set in a dystopian future, Britain. The main character, simply known as V, wears a Guy Fawkes mask as he fights against a totalitarian regime. The graphic novel was a cult classic, and the mask became a symbol of resistance amongst its fans.
So it went from historical villain to comic book character to symbol of resistance. But how did it jump from the pages of a graphic novel to the streets of the real world?
Well, the film adaptation of V for Vendetta in 2005 played a major role in popularizing the mask, but it was the adoption of the mask by groups like Anonymous, the Necker Collective, known for their online activism and protests, that truly cemented its place in modern protest culture. They saw the mask as a powerful symbol of anonymity and defiance against perceived oppression.
And from there, it just took off.
It became a global phenomenon. The Guy Fawkes mask appeared in protests around the world, from Occupy Wall Street to the Arab Spring. It became a symbol of resistance against corruption, inequality, and authoritarianism, transcending its original context and taking on a life of its own.
It's incredible to think about how a symbol born from a failed plot to reinstate Catholicism is now used by people fighting for all sorts of causes, many of which are completely unrelated to religion.
It really is. It speaks to the power of symbols and how their meaning can evolve and be reinterpreted over time. What's fascinating is that the mask itself is quite neutral. It's the actions and intentions of the people wearing it that give it meaning.
So what does it say about our culture that this symbol born from religious extremism now represents, for many, the fight for freedom and justice?
Perhaps it reflects our enduring fascination with rebellion, our desire to challenge authority and fight for what we believe in, even if those beliefs are drastically different from those of the original figure behind the symbol. Or perhaps it speaks to our need for symbols that can unify diverse groups under a common banner of resistance.
It's definitely something to think about. And what about Guy Fawkes himself? What do you think he'd make of his modern-day fame, of his image being used by activists and protesters around the world?
That's a great question. It's a question we can only speculate on, but I suspect he would be bewildered, perhaps even horrified to see how his image is being used today. After all, his goals were very specific to restore Catholicism to England. The causes that people are fighting for today, using his image, are far removed from his original intentions.
It's amazing how history can twist and turn, how figures can be reinterpreted and reimagined in ways that would be unimaginable to those who lived through those historical events.
The Gunpowder Plot is a prime example of this. It's a story of religious extremism, political intrigue, and a daring gamble that ultimately failed. But its legacy extends far beyond the events of that fateful night. It continues to resonate with us today, both as a cautionary tale and as a source of fascination, sparking debate and inspiring reflection on the nature of power rebellion and the stories we tell ourselves about the past.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into the Gunpowder Plot. It's been a journey through history, exploring a complex event and its even more complex legacy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
A huge thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe to the show for more fascinating explorations of history and its impact on our world today. And if you have any thoughts or questions about the Gunpowder Plot, we'd love to hear from you. You can find us on all the usual social media platforms. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and remember the 5th of November.